Hey everybody, and welcome to Backlog Busters. In this series, I'm working through every game in my backlog and going to let you know whether it's worth the hype. The game we'll be covering today is Professor Layton and the Curious Village. This is a game for the DS. It came out in 2007, and it was developed by Level 5. This game came out around the same time in my mind as all of those like brain training games, Brain Age, and all of those, kind of at a point where people were doing a lot of puzzles on their DS and like it was breaking into more of a mainstream market. And this game, at least from what I knew at the time of it, was a mix of story and puzzles. So something to get you to do puzzles, kind of have that, oh, I feel smart, but also have an interesting story with it. So why did I play this? I've always heard really good things about the Professor Layton series. They've reviewed really well. They're always on like top 10 lists for best DS games of all time. And it's a series I always wanted to go play. And I did play one of them on 3DS for like a little bit and bounced off of it. And I just really wanted to get back into the series, give it a fair shot, and start with the first one, the Eshop Closure. We're starting on a little bit of a downer with this, but if you weren't already aware, the 3DS and Wii U eShops are shutting down, believe in spring of 2023. So anything you haven't bought, you'll be no longer able to buy. You will be able to re-download your existing games that you've purchased, but who knows how long that lasts. With all that said, one of the games that was on the eShop is an exclusive to 3DS is Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. And this game was already pretty expensive physical because it didn't seem like there were that many copies out there. And now with the closing of the eShop, it's gotten even higher. So one of the first things I did when they announced the closure and I realized these prices aren't going to get better was go and purchase it digitally. And then with that and looking into what other 3DS games should I get before the shop closes, I realized that Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright has a DLC pack in it. So a little bit of background, that game, Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, is a combo between the Ace Attorney games and the Professor Layton games. So you do kind of the murder mystery, courtroom drama, and the puzzling stuff. Seems like a really good combination, but that game has an extra DLC pack that is something that you cannot purchase until you beat the entire game. You don't even have the option to buy it or give them money until you've cleared the game. This was kind of a weird time on the 3DS because they didn't have a place to easily download DLC from the eShop. So it kind of varied game by game how you purchase things, and I guess this one they kind of lock it behind that wall. But with that said, the reason I want to get into this Professor Layton series is because I want to play that crossover game. I want to be able to get the DLC before the eShop closes. And with that, I will need to play some of the Professor Layton games and some of the Ace Attorney games so that I have some knowledge of those characters and can kind of enjoy that game. Because I've heard it's a lot of fan service. It is made for fans of those games. And if you don't really know the characters, it's not going to be as big of a hit for you. So I guess starting off with playing a game so I can get to another down the line, but still excited to play this one. Just some little ulterior motives to get me to that point. This game, Professor Layton and the Curious Village, or Layton 1, is basically set in, as it says, a curious village. You are summoned to this village. There's a man who's basically died and left this hidden fortune in the town, this golden apple that if anybody finds it, they get his whole estate, his whole fortune, all of that. And you're basically called in to investigate and see if you can find this golden apple and basically solve the mystery. You bring your partner, your assistant, your kind of like puzzle detective in training, Luke, along with you, and you're basically going to solve this mystery. Now, you enter a name at the beginning of this game. You say, I am Jared, or whatever your name is, and you fill it out. So I thought you would show up in the game, or the kid that's accompanying would be renamed to whatever you had entered. That's not the case. That's just to save your profile. So you're not Luke. You're not really the professor. You're kind of, I guess, a bystander, or you're just the ghost watching all these events. But yeah, you follow the professor and the assistant that kind of does the puzzles, and the professor actually solves the case, but Luke kind of like does puzzles. The professor will kind of pass him off one and say, why don't you solve this one? It's too easy for me. And sometimes say things like, oh, I'd already solved it. I just wanted to see if you could solve it. So kind of an odd relationship. I guess he's an assistant. So this is a shadowing type of setup here or something. Shadowing for the job of puzzle detective, I guess. So how about the gameplay? The gameplay itself is kind of made up of You navigate around town by basically having these still images of the town with some, nice animation and everything in the background. There are villagers around in there, and you can kind of arrow over to the different areas. You can kind of go through an alleyway or go visit the mansion or go down these side roads. And in each of those individual screen, kind of like a point and click adventure game, you'll see characters out there. And when you interact with them, they'll basically give you a puzzle. You usually come with questions of where is this person, or I need to get to here, and they'll say, no, I don't want to answer that, but I do have a puzzle you can solve. And then when you solve the puzzle, they'll tell you the clue or progress the story. So that's how the main gameplay works, is you kind of investigating around town, talking to specific characters or even suspicious characters, and then they'll always kind of prompt you with do this puzzle first, and then we'll get the story going. So this section is called The Great and Not So Great. We're gonna, look into what I really liked about the game and what I maybe didn't like so much. If you're looking for me to drag a game through the coals, it's not really gonna happen. Pretty positive about most games, so we'll get some light critique and then we'll kind of move on. With that said, let's get into the very first thing. So, art direction. That's probably the biggest, great, just thing I loved about this game. And the art is just so good. I love the village. It's so quaint. It's so curious. The DS loses maybe a tiny bit of clarity, and even then, it just looks so good. There's good music in the background. There's good animations, and then you just have this nice little town with all these little villagers going around, and it's just a really interesting place to explore and interact with, and it just looks really, really good even on the DS screen, which I don't think loses so much quality that you can't enjoy it. Obviously, I enjoyed it a lot, but you definitely do notice some compression and things, and it just doesn't look as crisp as the art you're seeing kind of implies. The next thing that I found really great was just the town and villagers. So you have all these weird villagers around town. You get to explore this town and kind of poke around and see what's out there. And it's just really fun to interact with. All the characters have something to say and kind of fill in some of the background of the town and of the story. And it's just kind of fun to interact with everybody. I am honestly not that big a fan of point and click adventure games, so I didn't know how much I would enjoy that. But it's just a really fun, mysterious area that they've set up that you can interact with. And there's also just weird things about the town that kind of propel you through the story and make you interested to see more, like a weird looming tower that no one talks about, or a weird, fairgrounds that no one talks about. I guess a lot of it is just people not mentioning it. But all of that's just really interesting and adds so much more, detail to the world and makes it feel, I don't know, kind of real, or at least very interesting to interact with. The next thing that I found really great was the professor and the kid. What's going on here? Why is this kid with the professor? Who is this professor? These characters are super interesting immediately. I'm very captivated and interested to know what's going on. Part of the reason I want to know what's going on is is this his job? Does he get paid for this? Because I guess if he solves the mystery, he would technically get maybe paid for it. But he's maybe not hired. And then is the assistant trying to be a puzzle detective too? Because it seems kind of like a Sherlock. There's only one person who can do this. Is this kid really going to grow up and be the puzzle detective? And then this isn't his kid. This is someone else's kid, and he's in training or shadowing. Just this relationship is strange, and I want to know all about it. I want to know how did the professor get into this in the first place? Why does Luke, this child, even want to be a puzzle detective? How did he find out about this puzzle detective? It's very strange. I want to know everything there is to know about it. And I'm really hoping there's some of it that's revealed in this game, but I want to know more, and I really hope the series goes more into kind of their backstory and why these people exist. Also the puzzles. Why are there so many puzzles? Why is everyone in this town asking you to solve a puzzle? It's all just very strange, and no one seems weirded out by it. It's just I've got a puzzle. You're a puzzle person. Here, solve it before I tell you anything. And no one really has any issues sir, we're solving a murder. Yeah, they just do the puzzles and move on. It's very strange, very interesting, and I'm all in. I want to know what's happening in this series for sure. Even if it's just something built in to make the game fun to have the puzzles, it's still they give it meaning in this world and make it seem like this is just a part of this world that makes it really intriguing and I want to know more. So the last great we're going to be talking about is the puzzles. There are some really good puzzles in here, ones that you feel really accomplished for solving and give you that like aha moment, like, oh, I finally got this. There's also some interesting things in there with little hint coins hidden around the environment, so you can interact with like barrels or maybe a smokestack or anything that's like lightly animating, and you can go in and interact with it and you'll get a hint coin most of the time. There's a limited number of those in the world, but there are 3 hints you can unlock for each puzzle, so if you are struggling, you can kind of have it nudge you towards the solution. There are a ton of puzzles in this game. I think towards the end of the game, the only real cap I noticed of you need to have solved this many puzzles to progress was 70 puzzles, so you probably have to do at least that many to get to the ending. But there are a ton more, so if you really enjoy the puzzles, you're going to have so much to do in this game. There are a lot of bonus puzzles, and if there's one you're not enjoying, for the most part, you can skip it and go choose another one to do if you're working towards a cap or if you're just wanting a different puzzle to do. There are some places where it is a single puzzle you're required to do, but for the most part, you've got choice and just a lot of variety in these puzzles. So with that said, let's talk about the not-so-greats. My first not-so-great are the puzzles. I know I just talked about how I enjoyed a lot of them, but again, there were so many puzzles in this game, there kind of have to be some duds. And, oh man, some of these puzzles. Do y'all remember that magazine that you would find in like doctor's offices and dentist offices growing up that was called Highlights? And it had just like the most basic puzzles in it. Puzzles that were like spot the difference, or puzzles that had my least favorite type of puzzle, which is like Nancy's sitting next to Dave, but Jill is to the left of Ryan, and Ryan is near a door, and Dave can see a door, so where's Jimothy? I cannot begin to understand these puzzles. I don't know if I assume these are just logic, but I do not enjoy these puzzles. I always get tripped up by them, and it's just me like writing down notes or drawing little stick figures and being like, okay, these next to these. There's some puzzles like that, and it's kind of that highlight section puzzles to a T sometimes. No one promised that this was going to be something along the lines of the witness or the Talos principle or something like that. Maybe I made that assumption at some point that you would be doing one type of puzzles that the game uses, or a couple different types, and then it complicates them, and you kind of build on this understanding that's unique to this game. It doesn't really do that. It's kind of just individual random puzzles, which on one hand gives a ton of variety, and on the other hand, I'm just so dumb. Like some of these puzzles I just can't do at all. I'll just stare at them, enter the wrong answer, and then maybe use a hint or look at it a different way and say, oh, okay, this is it, and then do the wrong answer again, and then I'll unlock all 3 hints and be like, oh, okay, I missed this part, and then get it wrong again, to the point where I'd have to go either look it up or skip it if it was hopefully skippable. Some of these just would not click to me at all, and skipping the puzzles was really nice because I could skip the ones I wasn't proficient at, that I really didn't enjoy, or just for the life of me could not solve at all without looking them up. And I really didn't want to look up puzzles, but some of them that are required just way over my head. Just had no concept of how these were supposed to be solved. And even when they show the thing at the end, I'm like, well, never would have gotten that. Never would have made that realization. Through all of this, what I'm finding is that I'm just not puzzle proficient. Maybe I'm not even puzzle literate. I showed my partner a puzzle that I'd struggled with, and it was like my last attempt on it, and I was just frustrated, and I was like, can you solve this? Like, what's this trying to get me to solve? And she looked at it and solved it within seconds. That was me just misreading the prompt, which I had read several times already, so something is not clicking in some of these puzzles, or I'm just so stupid that this is not the game for me. Maybe I should have done the Brain Age games first, or something to a lesser extent before moving to this more complicated game. But some of these puzzles just stump me so bad. Also, sometimes the puzzles are just riddles. No, this should be disallowed from the series because if there's a little pun or a riddle or some like turn of phrase that's supposed to get you to the answer, I never got this correct. Those are just completely over my head. And then at the very end, when they like highlight the word or be like, oh, when we said, can't see the forest for the trees, we were really talking about, two trees because we said trees plural or something like that. There was just such a strange, like, no, I never would have thought that way. I thought you were giving me all the facts. Those just tripped me up so badly. But I really bet most of these puzzle complaints are just me and just me being dumb or not being in the right headspace for that moment. So if you enjoy puzzles, I still think this is worth giving a shot, and I don't think you should take this as all the puzzles are bad, because there were a lot of really good puzzles, but some of them were just beyond me. And I really hope that maybe quality improves, or maybe I'll just get smarter by the next game. Maybe that'll help. The last thing we have for not so great is just the length. I'm a little mixed on this, but the length for me, it was over 11 hours to see the credits. And that is not completing every puzzle. That's just completing what it was required and maybe a few extras if I needed them. And over 11 hours of puzzles took me a couple weeks to get through this. And this was sometimes playing a couple of puzzles at like my lunch break or while I'm waiting for something else. And that was really the ideal situation. And then there were the other times where I was trying to push through and get to the story. And so I'd do like 20 puzzles in a row or something, and that kind of wore on me, kind of burnt me out a little bit. But again, I don't think that's the way this is meant to be played. Honestly, I was just so interested in the story and like wanting to see what happens next that sometimes I would just try to, push through, do a bunch of puzzles, and that really burned me out. So I really think if you play this at a different pace, or what I assume is how it's meant to be played, kind of leisurely and day to day, and you kind of get a couple puzzles and a couple pieces of story each time. It even has a really nice feature in here that every time you turn it back on, it says like previously on and catches you up on the story. And like that even more points me towards, yeah, I might have been playing this wrong. I might have been pushing too hard, too fast into this game to try to get the story. And playing it a little slower might not burn you out. But again, 11 hours of puzzles was a little rough on me overall. With all that said, should you play Professor Layton in the Curious Village? We've gone through a lot of things here, and even with my complaints on the puzzles and the length burning me out a little bit, I still think I would recommend this game. I think it probably sits in kind of the medium, kind of the lukewarm, not quite hot, not like a full, yes, rush out and play this, but I still think it's a really good game. Some of those puzzles were just not for me, or not the puzzles I expected, or even just not the ones I'm good at solving, or again, may just be really stupid and have not understood these at all. That's very likely. And then I think also if you played this at a normal pace, of kind of more leisurely pace, you'd have a lot of fun with it. Because again, the music, the story, the characters, all that is great. The puzzles just wore on me a little bit, and I think it was because I was kind of forcing through. But with this first game, I see a ton of room for improvement in this series, and like a lot of ways they could go. I'm super interested in the story. I'm definitely going to check out the next one. I've actually started it on iOS because it will be with me, and I can do a couple puzzles every now and then. And I think that might be the ideal way to play it from how I've been doing this so far. I'm really excited to see where the story goes, and I'm hoping maybe puzzle quality improves, or maybe just has less little riddle things, or maybe I'll get smarter with each game and then it'll be really, really fun. And I'll come back to this one as kind of like a final round after I beat all the other games and realize all these puzzles were so baby easy that there was no issues and I was just being stupid. That's very likely. After all this, if you're interested in playing this game, I think really the best place to check this out is iOS and Android stores on your phone, because it'll be accessible to you at any point. You can play a puzzle or two while you're in line. And I really think that's going to be the ideal way to play it. Also, with those versions, they're called the HD versions. And most of the time that means they've done some weird smoothing filter on pixel art that I really dislike. And not so in this case. This seems like all the art is just the raw art that they made for this game, and it just looks really, really great. Again, you're not losing that much by going to the DS version, but I think the iOS and Android ports are actually really stellar and kind of a great way to play this game. It kind of feels meant for that popping it open anytime and playing it when you're waiting for something. And while when this came out, that might have been the case for the DS, you might have your DS on you less now. It might be better to play on the phone. With all that said, thank you for listening to me. Thanks for hearing my thoughts. Have you played this game before, or any games in this series? Do you have another that you recommend? Should I stick with it? I'm definitely going to stick with it, but I'm wondering, which of those games in the series is the best one? What should I be excited to get to? send me any of that in the comments. I'd love to talk about this game. The reason I'm starting this channel is just to talk about games that I've played, because most of the time when I say, oh, I just finished this classic game and mention it to one of my friends, they're like, I've never heard of that. So hopefully this is a avenue for me to talk to all of y'all and see these games that I've missed that have been on my backlog that I'm kind of playing, just so I will have experienced them. So I'll get to talk about it with them with people. So if y'all have anything, send it down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And with that, we've got one more game busted off the backlog. We will see you next time. Thank you so much.